Okay, we're going to finish up the book of Job today. We're going to be in Job chapter 42, the page 430 if you want to use one of the Bibles in front of you. I encourage you to take some additional notes. You should be an outline in your bulletin. The title's Happily Ever After. As kids, you probably look forward to these lines. Once upon a time, you were off into the lands of kings and queens and princes and knights and good and evil, as well as love, romance, marriage. What wonderful stories. Always ended with what? They lived happily ever after. So, I've got a picture here of Cinderella. And if it's one of your favorites or not. No? Not Ben's favorite. But it wasn't mine either. Yeah, once upon a time in a faraway kingdom there lived a young girl named Cinderella. She was kind and gentle and beautiful child with the most radiant smile. She had a heart full of love. But unfortunately, she hadn't been kind. Fate hadn't been kind to Cinderella. Her mother passed away and she was being raised by her stepmother. Stepmother had 2 daughters of her own, and she was terribly jealous of Cinderella's beauty and kind heart. She treated Cinderella unfairly, making her do all the housework, dressed in rags, while her own daughters wore fine clothes and lived in luxury. Despite the cruelty she faced, Cinderella remained kind and gentle, never letting her stepmother's unkindness change who she was. She would often seek comfort in the garden, talking to the birds and the animals who had become her dearest friends. One day the kingdom received exciting news. The prince was hosting a grand ball at the palace. Every maiden in the land was invited. Cinderella's stepsisters were overjoyed and spent weeks preparing their gowns, practicing their dance moves. She watched her stepsister with a sad smile, hoping she might be able to attend the ball and experience a bit of the magic she'd heard about in her mother's stories. But her stepmother insisted on, no, you're not going. She would stay home, continue with her chores. The night the ball arrived and Cinderella was left alone in her old clothes while her stepsisters and stepmother departed for the palace. She sat by the fireplace, tears in her eyes, wishing for just a taste of the magic her mother told her about. And suddenly, a soft, sweet voice filled the room. It was her fairy godmother, a beautiful figure surrounded by a soft, glowing light. "Why are you crying?" she asked. Cinderella explained her wish to attend the ball, but now her stepmother had been unkind and refused to let her go. Fairy godmother said, "Don't worry, you're going to the ball." With a wave of her hand, Cinderella's rags were transformed into a stunning gown. On her feet, she wore the most delicate glass slippers that sparkled like stars. Fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a magnificent carriage, and mice, amazingly, into beautiful horses, so Cinderella could travel to the palace in style. Before she left, the fairy godmother gave her one warning. This would all end at midnight, so you got to come home before then. She thanked the fairy godmother, climbed into the magical carriage, her heart dancing with joy. The moment she entered the ballroom, the entire room fell silent. The prince, charmed by her beauty, approached her and they danced together like a dream. She was the happiest she had ever been. But the hours flew by. Suddenly she heard the bells of the palace clock. The first strike of midnight sent a shiver down her spine. She remembered what her fairy godmother said, so she quickly hurried out, said goodbye. One of her slippers came off on her foot going down the steps. She didn't have time to reach to get it, so she left anyway. Her beautiful gown and glass slippers turned back into rags, leaving her with only the memory of the enchanted evening she had spent at the palace. The next day the prince was what? Determined to find out who the slipper would fit. So he went around place to place. When they arrived at Cinderella's cottage, her stepsisters eagerly tried to fit their feet into the glass slipper, but it was too small for them. She finally said, "Is it okay if I try?" And he said, "Sure." The prince agreed. As he placed the foot into the glass slipper, it fit perfectly. The prince's eyes lit up with joy as he realized he'd found the maiden he had danced with at the ball. Her stepsisters were astonished and upset, but even though they were mean to her, Cinderella didn't feel angry. Instead, she forgave them. And so Cinderella was reunited with the prince. And guess what? They lived happily ever after. Today we're going to see how Job's life ended up. Was he happily ever after or not? A lot of people in the Bible did not end up happily ever after. Moses, although he was faithful to God, didn't get to go into the promised land because he disobeyed at one point. Saul and his 3 sons were all killed by the Philistines. Saul fell on his sword and died. John the Baptist was beheaded. Paul was martyred for his faith. David's life was a mess because of sin within his family. Children of Israel in the Old Testament were scattered all over different countries. Stephen was stoned to death, so none of them had a happy ever after life. So I want to take a look and see how Job's life ended and see what lesson there is for us. Just a reminder, if you haven't been here for the series, starts off with God bragging about Job to Satan. And he says he's a just man. He stayed away from evil. Satan says, well, that's just because you built a hedge around him. So God allowed Satan to attack him. And one day he lost all his resources and all 10 of his children died in one day. He still remained faithful to the Lord, even though his wife didn't want to. And Satan came back and God bragged again. Satan says, well, skin for skin, let me get at the guy. God said, okay, you can't kill him, but I'll let you attack him. He ends up with excruciating pain. When his friends came to see him, they couldn't even recognize him. For 3 weeks they sat there and said nothing. And then they opened their mouths and said, this must be going on in your life because there's sin in your life. And Job said, no, it's not sin. And so Job kept crying out, God, where's God? I need to talk with God and get this figured out. Finally, God responded and asked Job 77 questions. Job couldn't answer any of them. He finally got the message, okay, God is God and I'm not. Chapter 42. After the Lord had said these things to Job, verse 7. He said, Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your 2 friends because you have not spoken of me what is right as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job. Sacrifice a burnt offering for yourself. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept this prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken to me what is right as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. So Job prayed for his friends. God forgave those friends. And then it says, verse 10, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord made him prosperous again and gave him twice as much as he had before. So in your outline, first point, Job's possessions were doubled. He had been wealthy before, he lost all those things, and then he sat on a pile of ashes and scraped himself for months and months and months, excruciating pain. But now God restored to him, actually doubled his resources. In verse 12 says he had 14,000 sheep. Initially he only had 7,000 sheep. 6,000 camels, originally only 3,000. 1,000 yoke of oxen, again only 5,000. 1,000 donkeys. God gave him double his resources. What would that look like today if that were you? If you have 2 cars, you might have 4 cars. If you have 3 cats, you might have 6 cats. You might have a garage full of stuff, you might have 2 garages full of stuff. The truth is, some of you think, wow, it would be great if God doubled my resources and I had twice as much as I could ever have. The truth is, Job was a wealthy man, and the truth is, whether you realize this or not, you are also wealthy. I've mentioned this before, but the truth is, based on world standards, if you make $25,000 a year, you receive $25,000 a year, you are in the top 10% wealthiest people in the world. If you make $37,000 a year, you're in the top 4% of the wealthiest people in the world. And if you make $50,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of the wealthiest people in the world. So most of us here are wealthy. 2.6 billion people, 2.6 billion people receive less than $2 a day. 1 billion people receive less than $1 a day. Country Haiti, it's about $2 a day. In 2000, I took some guys on a mission trip to Haiti. We had a missionary who was training there. We went to a place called the House of Hope. It was a home for children who were abandoned. And it was an amazing thing. God put it on our hearts to help support that ministry. Honduras, average is $5 a day in Honduras. $5 a day. Total of $1,826 a year. So technically, let me remind you this: I didn't bring my chips with me, but you see, it's not your money anyway. First Timothy says, you didn't bring anything in, and guess what? You're not taking anything out. Technically, everything you have is because the Lord's provided that for you. And so Job was tremendously blessed again. Doubled all his resources. Secondly, his relatives and friends show up. They didn't show up when he's sitting on the pile of ashes very much, but they show up now. They eat with him in his house. Verse 11 says, all his brothers and sisters and everyone who'd known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought upon him. And each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. Ate with him in his house. Comforted. What does that look like today? Yeah. 2 ways to discover how many friends you have. Win the lottery or own a pickup truck. That's how you figure out how many friends you have. He didn't win the lottery, but he became wealthy in a very short period of time. The third one, you may consider this a blessing or not a blessing. He's given 10 more children. Look at verse 13. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. First daughter's name was Jemima, the second Keziah, the third Keren-Happuch. Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. They were as beautiful as Cinderella, all 3. And typically, girls didn't get an inheritance, but these girls got an inheritance. Okay, he was probably 70 years old when he finally got healthy again. And now he and his wife who said, curse God and die, obviously she stayed with him. From 70 on, had 10 more children. Okay, so some of you here who are in your 70s, maybe God will bless you with more children. I don't know if that's a blessing or not. You can look at it whatever. 10 more pregnancies. Yeah, technically they got to enjoy being parents with the wisdom of what? Grandparents. Had more wisdom as grandparents than they did as parents. 3 beautiful daughters. 7 sons. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, sons are a heritage from the Lord, children a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of warriors are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is a man whose quiver is full of them. Jewish people wanted sons because they carried on the name of the family. 7 more sons. Did it take away the pain of losing their children? No. But God gave them 7 more sons and 3 beautiful daughters. In chapter 7, verse 7, when Job was going through his excruciating pain, he made this statement, my eyes will never see happiness again. But God said, no, your eyes will see happiness again. And fourthly, he's given a long and satisfying life. A long and satisfying life. Verse 16 says, after this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation, and so he died old and full of years. 140 more years. 70 and 140 years more. He saw his children, grandchildren, 4th generation. His great-great-grandchildren. No one blesses like God. The old hymn says, count your many blessings. Some of you are saying, I wouldn't mind taking number 1 and number 4, but I'm not so sure about 2 and 3. But, yeah. I have a very simple principle for today. Why did God bless Job in the first place? Why did God re-bless Job? Secondly, because God blesses us so we can bless others. God bless blesses us so we can bless others. You weren't blessed just so you could enjoy it all yourself. You've been blessed to be a blessing. This principle is based on Genesis chapter 12, verses 1, 2, and 3. I'll put it on the screen. The Lord had said to Abraham, he's calling Abraham to be the leader of the Jewish nation. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. God bless Abraham to be a blessing. Technically, God's blessed us to be a blessing. See, early on when his friends were criticizing him, one of them, Eliphaz, had accused Job of insensitivity to human need. You don't have to turn to, but in chapter 22, verses 4 to 11, here's what he said. Is it for your piety that he rebukes you and brings charges against you? Is not your wickedness great, or not your sins endless? You demanded security from your brothers for no reason. You stripped men of their clothing, leaving them naked. You gave no water to the weary. You withheld food from the hungry, though you were a powerful man owning land, an honored man living on it. And you sent widows away empty-handed and broke the strength of fatherless. That is why snares are all around you. Why sudden perils terrify you? Why is it so dark you cannot see? Why a flood of water covers you? But in chapter 29, Job responds and reminds them of what he did to chapter 29, verse 7. He says this, when I went to the gate of the city, this is before all this took place, I took my seat in the public square. The young men saw me and stepped aside, and the old men rose to their feet. Chief men refrained from speaking and covered their mouths with their hands. The voices of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouths. Whoever heard me spoke well of me. Those who saw me commended me, because I rescued the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to assist him. The man who was dying blessed me. I made the widow's heart sing. I put on righteousness as my clothing. Justice was my robe. I was eyes to the blind, feet to the lame, a father to the needy. I took up the case of the stranger. God blessed it, Job to be a blessing, and God has blessed us to be a blessing. It's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. A while back I did a message from Acts. Perhaps you'll still have this magnet on your fridge. He said, remember the words of Jesus, it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. God's opened the door for Joey and I to go back to Honduras in early December to help pass out the shoe boxes. We were able to do that twice before, to actually be there when we passed out the shoe boxes. I wish you could all be there to see that. I mean, these children absolutely, I mean, again, Honduras averages $5 a day. We first went to La Venta. The only vehicle anybody in the church had was like a 1972 Honda. The doors wouldn't quite close right. And one other person had a beat-up Datsun pickup. It all rusted out because they were trying to be gracious to Joey. They let her ride in the front, but you could see straight through because there's no floor. I felt better being in the back, holding on to the sides. They just don't have much. And to see those kids blessed is a tremendous blessing. Those of you who've done shoe boxes understand. Count your blessings, but remember, you've been blessed to be a blessing. Jesus said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul writes the letter to Timothy as a young man to instruct the believers there. And he says this, command those who are rich in this present world. And whether you want to admit it or not, again, based upon the statistics I shared earlier, most of us in this room, based on world averages, are wealthy. Why are we wealthy? Because God's blessed us to be a blessing. You can accumulate more stuff. But he says here, command those who are rich in this present world, not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth. Basically, in North America, most people put their confidence or their hope in wealth. And for you to wake up tomorrow in a city in Latin America with no money, only the clothes on your back, you'd feel pretty insecure. He says here, not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What should those who are rich do? Do good, be rich in good deeds, be generous, be willing to share. He says, in doing so, you'll lay up treasures in heaven. I mean, that's what Jesus said when he was here, didn't he, in Matthew chapter 6? He said, your heart always follows your treasures. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break through and steal. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to be also. Several months ago, we were getting my mother-in-law's older Buick inspected by a mechanic in Tyrone. Just as you cross the bridge, Andrew's garage there, we took it there. He said it is so badly rusted underneath, can't do it. So we took it to the junkyard across the road. And I was just amazed. All those cars piled up in the junkyard. One day, everybody's treasure was there in that vehicle. Now it's just rusting away in the junkyard. God blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first part. You can lay treasures up here, or you can lay treasures up in heaven, being generous. God's blessed us to be a blessing. Bob McHugh tells a story about his son. His son wanted some French fries, so he took to McDonald's. He bought him a supersized French fry. He said as he was driving back home, the thing smelled so good, he reached over and took one fry out of the bag. He said, Dad, you can't eat that, that's mine. These are my fries. He said, immediately I thought about three thoughts. He said, first of all, I thought, as I sat there, my child has forgotten that I'm the one who purchased the fries in the first place. I brought him here. I took him to McDonald's. I made the order. I paid for the order. I handed it to him. I'm driving back home. He could not have any fries if it wasn't for me. The only reason he has any fries is because of me. So the second thing I thought about, my child doesn't realize that I could take those fries away in a second. Or on the other hand, I could buy him an entire truckload of fries if I wanted to. I had the power to do that. Then he said, the third thing I realized is I didn't need his fries. In fact, I could easily get my own. I could buy myself 100 packs of them if I wanted to. I just wanted him to learn to be generous. Now, those three lessons are basically the reason why God wants you to learn to be generous with people. God says, I want you to remember that I'm the source of everything that you have. Let's be honest. If it wasn't for God blessing your life and providing for you, He's the one who provided everything. He could give you double what you have. He could take away everything you have. God says, I don't need your fries. I don't need your money. I'm not poor. I just want you to learn to be generous. We've been blessed. We've been blessed to be a blessing. You can hoard more stuff. You can leave it all behind. Or you can invest in things that are going to outlive you and impact lives for eternity. That, he says, you've been blessed to be a blessing. Father, I thank you for Job's life. Thanks for all the lessons we've learned from him. In the end, Lord, you did help him live happily ever after. But again, you blessed him to be a blessing. Lord, all of us in this room have been blessed. Help us to keep that focus. That we've been blessed to be a blessing too. Help us help the poor. Help us impact lives for eternity. Help us invest in others who don't know you. Lord, we just thank you for the way you've done that. Pray you help us to be people who appreciate. Help us all learn to be unselfish. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.